Happy Friday. I apologize. I have to restart this podcast. I had a child come in here and yell for me, really. She didn't understand I was busy, and I accidentally stopped the video instead of pausing it. So I'm going to start over. So bear with me if it seems choppy. This will be the one I post, but it's cool. Anyway, this is a Letter to the Left podcast. This whole podcast is based around trying to initiate a discussion with the left from someone who's more on the right, and also try to explain what the right sees, what is going on in reality, and what is perceived reality, right? So, like, what I like go into, if you reference my podcast or you've been listening to my podcast lately, I like to dive into more of the conceptual terms and events going on and kind of dive into why things are the way they are. And instead of you just seeing fights on Twitter between right-wing influencers, or before you sit there and think like, why is the leftist media always constantly feel like they're building this narrative, and then like when you look at it, it's like completely different. I try to explain some of that stuff, and it's mainly for the common American, because I feel like that we have dove into this such like a state of want to be ignorance. I'm not trying to be offensive, but like a wannabe ignorance, if you will, is like I don't really. You always hear it with young people. I don't care about politics, and they don't realize that you should care about politics. You should care about this stuff because this is why it affects your lives. And then you wonder why things are going on, and you're like all mad and pissed off, and you haven't voted in 3 cycles. You haven't done any of that, and it's like, well, that's why you should care about politics. So that's what I kind of do. But first, on Fridays, the intent is on Fridays is like a Whiskey Friday thing. So as you can see, I have my bar behind me. I'm a big whiskey guy. And today I am starting off the weekend with an Eagle Rare 10-year. Simple, all reliable. So cheers to the weekend to all. Very good. And kind of the intent of that as we move forward is, once I get enough subscribers and followers or people that listen, then I can actually have live Fridays where I'll pour a glass. We'll talk about some things, and then we can get your comments in the comment section and actually kind of discuss things rather than just me talking to a podcast. So that's kind of like what I want to get to. Obviously going to take time because we got to make sure we get this thing off rolling so we can actually start opening these discussions and starting to kind of like shed a light on what's behind the curtain. So today I want to go into the state of the left. And what I mean by that is, like, why is the left so unpopular? Because the reality of it is, if you are more of a left-wing person, the left is highly unpopular right now. What do I mean by that? If you go on any polling site and you take a popularity polling of congressional Democrats, they're going to poll in the 17th percentile. Or the 7th, sorry, not the first percentile, 17%-ish, right? That's like the lowest since the Civil War. Usually congressional popularity is a really good indicator of American sentiment. Now, granted, like, well, the Republican sentiment isn't high either. It's like, no, it's like in the high 30s, low 40s, but that's way higher than 17%, right? Like, that's unheard of for our time period. And a lot of that is because of the reality that the left kind of just takes the wrong side to things. I don't really know how to explain it other than that. Part of that's because the media and the way the media pushes narrative, and the media is very left-leaning. Like, for example, like, you always see an inflammatory headline. Like, you'll see it on Twitter, you'll see it on Instagram or something, and you, as an American, you probably don't sit there and click on the article, right? They plan on that. They know that. They know exactly what they're doing. And then if you actually look in the article, you see, like, well, 2/3 of the article is just narrative pushing. There's no actual context to it until the very end of it. And all of a sudden, then it'll go narrative, then it'll go data, and then it'll go context with the data, right? At the very end of the article, knowing that you're probably not going to put forth brain bites and or time to read that whole thing through. And then there it is. Like, then if you do read it through, you automatically think, you're like, oh my gosh, like, this headline is completely misleading, and they all are. But that's a tactic, right? That's how you build narrative. And a lot of them, there's theories on that of why the media is so left-leaning. Like, some of it is leftist agitators, like foreign agitators. I've talked about that before in my podcast, where we have like a lot of foreign entities that have private industry here and shell companies, and they donate to information pushing sectors. And they do that on purpose to cause complete chaos and to push their narratives. Some of it also is just like billionaires. Soros always comes up, right? He's always pushing, he's always donating, stuff like that. And that's just kind of how it is. But I digress. The point of this podcast though is the state of the left, and I want to get into that unpopularity of it. The left has for some reason kind of just chosen the wrong side of things on most issues that most average Americans feel very passionately about. We saw it in a unique way because we saw Obama, we saw Trump, then we saw Biden, and then now we're seeing Trump again. It kind of shows a contrast, and it kind of shed a light on how the Democrats and the left kind of play the game. What that means. This is why the left is so unpopular, because what happened is they saw everyone in the media and everyone loved Obama. All right? They loved Obama. Come out Trump. Trump has a pretty decent presidency for his first term, whether you like it or not. You look at the unbiased realities of it, he did. But you saw the media completely shift in their narrative pushing. And then come Biden, and then all of a sudden you saw a complete shift again, where it was like, oh, the U.S. could do nothing wrong. Even policies done by Trump, then all of a sudden were welcomed by Biden as his accomplishments. A really good example of this was COVID. When Trump was president in 2020 and COVID was happening, George Floyd riots, all that, the first thing you saw was, we're not going to take Trump's vaccine. We're not going to take Trump's vaccine. We're not going to take Trump's. And literally, it was overnight. Once the Democrats came in, they were literally all about the vaccine mandates, essentially taking kids away from their parents if you didn't get a vaccine mandate. A vaccine that didn't really work, by the way, and that's been proven. Again, you can look that up. It didn't really work. It wasn't effective in any capacity, nor was it really safe. I wouldn't say it was unsafe, but it wasn't safe either to use. But it's little things like that where it's well, we don't have an issue with. We don't have a good example of modern day. We don't have an issue with immigration, right? They tried to use the race card on Trump in his first term when he was running to try to get because he was so border heavy or border policy heavy, and then all of a sudden it became the exact opposite in Biden, and it was I'm not going to enforce any border laws. And then all of a sudden you saw this huge flip, and where it literally went from if you sat there and took the same poll from the same polling, so CNN, for example, did a poll do you support mass deportations? And from Trump's first term, it was 30 percentile for and 70 percentile against mass deportations. By 2024, it had completely flipped to 75-25. 75 for mass deportation. And that's why you see it today is mass deportations, if you want. It's funny because the media actually did deportations first and put the word mass in front of it to try to skew it. And then it got even more popular. People do not like what happened, because the reality of it is the left likes to take the side of what they think is a perceived victim. And what do I mean by that? Aligned victimhood. It's we have to take the side that conventionally is the little guy that is being picked on, because conventionally that is who people like. Again, it was a power grab. We have to go for the little guy. People get really tired of that, though, when you have to force the little guy narrative on people who aren't the little guy. And this last couple of years did not help the case. We started seeing these giant society-changing almost events, like George Floyd riot, for example. Everyone then finds out that he died of fentanyl poisoning. It's what Jacob Blake. People were running around with Jacob Blake shirts and stuff and riding in the streets for Jacob Blake. The dude was a convicted rapist, was in the process of violating a restraining order, and he had a knife, and he was ignoring all the police officers' warnings to stop, and so he was shot. He was being hostile in a hostile environment, and every leftist woman you saw was yeah, no, we're going to rep Jacob Blake, literally a convicted rapist. Breonna Taylor, for example, the footage finally came out 3 years later, and it was yeah, she was hiding with her drug dealing boyfriend, who they were coming to arrest. And as the cops went in to do the order, they started open firing, and they shot through the table that they were hiding behind because they used as a barricade, and they hit her too. She actively was in process with that. But no one talks about that because no one follows up, except for some people. And that's why you get on Twitter where people start changing, and they're oh shit, all this stuff that I used to believe in is bullshit. And that's kind of where you see that popularity fading. The immigration debate is probably the biggest one that you see, because you see every time it's the same storyline. It's the same tactic. It's, we're going to highlight collateral damage from these ICE raids, and we're going to paint ICE like the whole constant like fascist is Gestapo. It's complete bullshit, and everyone knows that, right? But where they get it is, well, the media and all these leftists are going to highlight these people like Garcia, right? And that one backfired because, you know, they visit him. All these congressmen went and visit him, and guess what? The guy ended up having like a huge track record of beating his wife, raping his wife, human trafficking, and all this stuff. And they're still fighting that court fight, you know, to keep him in the country. But this guy's like a complete piece of shit, and you have all these people like vouching for him, like, oh no, he's just an American. I was like, no, he's not. You know, every single outlet that reported on that dude will tell you that, but no one looks at the articles. No one follows up anymore. And then, like, it's highlighting people like that, but then it's also highlighting, like, the abuela. You always hear the constant same, like, tired line. What about abuela that's been here for 30 years? Okay. But you're ignoring all the, you know, the 10,000 for every one abuela who's being deported, who's completely innocent, right? You're ignoring the 10,000 others that are getting deported that have like huge and vast criminal records. You know, another good example, the kids, the 6 illegal aliens that were in the farm in California recently, right? Like a couple months ago. I don't remember exactly. You can look it up. But like the whole thing that came about, oh, these were just strawberry farmers. Like all the media pundits, all the leftist pundits on Twitter, these are media farmers. Wait like 2 weeks before you post, because then all of a sudden it was a marijuana. Okay, and they were, oh, this is the kicker, sorry. They were talking about how like, oh, they were arrested in front of kids because there were kids working on that or volunteering on that farm, strawberry farm. It was a family farm, all this bullshit, right? It was a marijuana farm. The kids were working there illegally. And also the illegal aliens they were after, all 3 of them had criminal records for pedophilia and child rape. Literally all of them. But no one follows up anymore. Except, like, again, it's like these people live in a vacuum, right? These leftists, they live in a vacuum. They don't realize that we live in a world of instant information and Twitter and Instagram where people can literally be like, hey, wait a second, that doesn't seem right. They can get a headline and be like, that doesn't seem right. Let me look this up. Do like 15 minutes of digging and you find out, well, there's way more context and backstory to what happened here. And that's probably the biggest reason. That's, in my opinion, I think the border and the immigration policy has killed the left. And that's why you see like Gavin Newsom and Bernie Sanders, like they're saying like, no, we have to have a tough border, because they realize they realize they fucked up. They fucked up for 2 whole generations, because they realized, like, first of all, the reason why they wanted immigration was because they knew, 100% they knew, that if we can get as many in as possible right now, we are fading in polls. They knew that prior. They knew that in 2016. They knew that in 2017. They were starting to fade in polls. That was a warning sign to the Democrats, like, oh, young men specifically are turning more right-wing. They're done with our shit. So what'd they do? They went, okay, well, we got to annex all these people, but we have to get them in here first, and we can't get enough through the legal process. It's too slow. So cue a lot of the things, and then eventually it became like, well, then by state we can allow illegal aliens anyway to vote, which is one of the reasons why they hate voter ID laws. Remember, that's a very common sense law. Every single state or nation in this world has some sort of voter ID law if they vote. Literally every single one of them. All right, every single one of them have border laws, and if you overstay your visa, you get deported, just like here's supposed to be. There's nothing new about that. So you really saw the red flags on that plan to annex all these people, and they know that per every poll that immigrants or kids of immigrants vote, like 70% something Democrat or liberal. They knew what they were doing. All right, and they got caught, because when they started really throwing up the flags when states were doing voter ID laws after 2020, that should have been your first cue, because they're like, oh, they need those illegal alien votes. And that's why you saw a lot of those states that had voter ID laws, they all went red. A lot of the states that didn't went blue, to include like right Michigan. They went their voter ID law, and they switched from blue to red. Pennsylvania, voter ID, blue to red. Wisconsin, blue to red. Because the reality of it is, it's very simple to get an ID, contrary to what that narrative was. And they don't want illegals voting. I mean, we don't want illegals voting. We do not want migrants voting in our elections, because the reality of it is, migrants today are not like the migrants of the 1800s or the 1900s, like we always talk about. And that's another talking point that digs the liberals in trouble. They always say things like, well, we're a nation built on immigrants. But it's like, yes, but the immigrants of yesterday are not like the immigrants of today. The vast majority of immigrants back then were leaving their homelands without the intent to return in any capacity. They were dropping everything to come to America and to stay here and become American. That's the first thing. And that's huge, right? Because it wasn't about bringing their culture here. They may have brought little customs and traditions, not like we see today, where it's like again, migrants today, and you see it in Europe more, but migrants today, they expect you to cater to them. Back then, that was not the case. Not to mention, they did not get any handouts back then. It was like, you stepped out that boat, you got documented as an incoming immigrant, and then you were homeless. You were at ground zero. And what did they do? They may have given you a hot bowl of soup or something, and it was like, hey, find a job, get to work. You know, it's not the same. And that's another tired argument they try to do, and that's what digs them into holes, which makes them unpopular, because people know that. Most people know that, and if you sit there and you say, like, hey, that's not entirely true, and you bring that point up that I just brought, they tend to freeze, because they're like, well, you know, they try to compare it. It's like, no, it's not. Okay, because today, first of all, the vast majority of immigration comes for military-age males unaccompanied. They come here and they bring their custom and courtesies here, and then they send money back home. That's not money that's going into our economy. It's going back home to their economy. That's mistake number one. That's why it hurts us. Because, like, okay, well, now you're not even helping our local businesses and our economy at all. You're just sitting here sending your shit back to your family, you know, and it's like, what are you doing, dude? Second, illegal immigrants specifically can work under minimum wage. That's a key. All right. And it's a fact. They can, which why corporations and like farmers and stuff like that like them, because they don't have to pay them minimum wage because they're not under the tax code. So there's no one to oversee that. All right. And again, they're usually living on the premises of the place they work, and or with family members that are there that are living 20 to a house or 20 to an apartment complex. And so they're paying dirt cheap, and they're sending the rest of the money back home. That's another thing where the dollar goes a lot farther in their home too. The third, and this is a big one, the cultural difference. And I mentioned it earlier with Europe. A lot of immigrants today come here and they demand subsidies and they expect subsidies, and then they don't get off of it at all. Remember, the Democrats were famous, there is no immigrant on Medicare, Medicaid, and then it came out, and all of a sudden they shut up about it, because all of a sudden it became out that, yeah, there's literally billions and billions of dollars every year going to illegal immigrants over Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and all this stuff. That's exactly what's going on, and it rubs Americans the wrong way. So, like I was saying, it rubs people the wrong way, and it doesn't help any case when then they don't try to assimilate to anything you value. You can say what you want, like about American diversity and all that stuff, right? That's fine. That's all fine and dandy, but there has to be some assimilation, because if you have too many different cultures and too many different cultural identity, you have zero identity as a country, which is imperative for societal function. You have zero common ground, which is what you see today, right? There is no reason why a abuela who's been here for 20 years doesn't know English. And I get it. Like, I don't mind Spanish. Like, I don't care if they speak Spanish in their own house. I don't even care if they speak it in public. But if I can't sit there and communicate with you at all, like if you can't do it and you've been here for 20 years, hell, you've been here for 3 years, that's ridiculous. And that shows like there is no intent, right? And it's the same thing of like, oh, well, they didn't get their papers. They didn't even start their process. It's like, why not? Like, You know what the law is. You know what our border code is. You know that every 4 years you're going to get some right-wing dude who's probably going to start cracking down on illegal migrants, especially in today's age. You see it already now in Europe too. It's a thing. You know what you're supposed to do, and you choose not to do it. And that's the problem, right? That's where it becomes hazy for Americans of why you're so unpopular on this subject, immigration in general now. Because it's like, hey, you keep on coming up with excuses as to why Abuela doesn't have her, green card or papers or whatever. It's like, no, it's just because she didn't want to. It's because her family didn't want to. Because the reality of it is, migrants are not like what they used to be. They do not care to become American. They don't care about American anything. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about our laws, our customs, our courtesies. They do not care. That's the reality of it. I can't tell you how many times and how many millions of illegal migrants have deportation orders. Like legally. They went through their process. They got their process. And guess what? They were said, no, you still are denied. You need to go back. And they refused to come forward, and they did not leave. If you go to Mexico and do that, and you overstay your visa, you will get deported like the next day. It's ridiculous. All right? So when people sit there, when people sit there and say that, like, well, this is like immigration and all this stuff, it's like, no, it's not. And if I sat there and we sent 20 million gringos down to Mexico and we told them, no, you don't need to learn Spanish to get a job. You don't need to learn Spanish to do anything. You don't need to become a citizen of the country. Therefore, you don't need to pay fully in taxes. You don't need to really help out at all other than just take money. And then you can ship all that money back to your family in the U.S. And by the way, every single American holiday you celebrate crazily, and you expect other people to speak your language in their own country. Every single one of you would be like, well, that's bullshit. It's like, yeah, I know. It's the same shit here. That's why people are tired of it. That's why. And there's so much fraud too. It's like the arrogance and the entitlement of migrants now to demand housing, to demand Medicare, to demand all this stuff. It's taxing our system. I mean, there's no reason why your taxpayer dollars should be paying for any housing for illegal migrants. It doesn't matter if they're refugees. It doesn't. Our refugee Good Samaritan thing is you are able to come here temporarily. You see it with the Somalis. They were quote unquote refugees. What's going on now? Billions of dollars a year are just stolen brazenly by these Somalis in Minnesota. And it's all over the country, by the way. That's a Somali thing. And it really is. It actually is a Somali thing. I'm not trying to pinpoint one group of people, but legitimate. That's a legitimate thing. Because you go back in time, this is not the first time they've been caught with these daycares. You go back to 2013, the same place, Minneapolis, Minnesota, had a huge undercover investigation where they found the same shit. 2018, same shit. 2022, same shit. Now, same shit. That's a Somali thing. But they're labeled as temporary protected status, which is a bullshit thing anyway. But they're labeled that, and then guess what? They come here, and they know, well, all the good white libs aren't going to call on us because if they do, which you've already seen it, what do? Well, you're just racist. You see all the time. They literally, when that Leering Center happened, they caught that, the first statement that came out from those Somalis that own that daycare, this is nothing but a race charge and racist person going after Somali people or brown people or some shit like that. Go read the statement. That's literally because they know. They're not stupid. They know exactly what they have to say. They know exactly what they need to do to make all the good white libs shut up and to sit there because we're so afraid of being called that. So they've weaponized it. It's no different from the last 4 years at the border. Literally, there were several journalists on YouTube that were at the border the whole time. And they would interview these people. They would interview all of them. They were from Africa. They were from all sorts of places. And what happened? All they said was no, they say the cartel gave me the script. And it had this specific sentences to say, so that way we were catch and release. That way they'd give us our phone. Yes, and that happened. They were giving away phones, government dime. They were giving checks. They were giving bus tickets. They were giving airplane tickets, and we were on our merry way, without a court date, without anything. When you open your heart to people, they take advantage of it. That's just a fact. And the whole bleeding heart liberal thing is showing its ugly head now. That is why you're struggling in politics as a leftist. If this is reaching my audience, right? Some of you, I hope, are liberal and are hearing this out. You are on the wrong side of history right now in almost everything. That's why you're struggling. That's why Trump keeps bodying people. Your own ideology has failed you because it has become essentially hijacked by liberal white women, essentially, that don't understand the reality of the situation. All they care about is how they feel about a situation, and they have to be the big white savior. It's liberal women in general. It doesn't matter if it's, I guess, white or black. It's liberal women in general because they're the loudest. They're the only. They have nothing going on, and they've emotionally invested so hard in fighting whatever cause, right? Being some sort of social justice crusader, that they forget that people have taken advantage of them on that. And it's money laundering. I mean, Black Lives Matter is the perfect example that everyone knows. That organization is essentially dead because of how much fraud and bullshit they were. I mean, they were so corrupt, dude. They were buying, all their chapter leaders were just buying $1 million houses or family friends. It was a racket. They were racketing. They were racketeering your money, and they used dead black men in shitty situations, the wrong ones too, which was wild to me, but they used shitty situations with shitty, I don't know how to even describe it. Like, just shitty situations in general. They were using that. And they knew that you were just going to chomp at the bit to put your black square up, to look like a hero, to look like this, or to look like that, to look like a victim, or you're a victim aligned. And people are tired of it. People are tired of the left in that aspect because it's just constant victim alignment. It's these people are victims, and there's no context to that. It's like, really? Look, I'm not even a pro-Israel guy, but the Gaza shit, another great example. You have these white liberal women marching in droves for free Palestine. For an ideology and society that literally hates you for being a woman. Like, the feminists are the biggest contradiction in modern society because they almost always go for the opposite of what they should be going for, if that makes sense. It's like, yeah, we're going to put for Jacob Blake, they'll die for Jacob Blake. It's like, yeah, you mean the convicted rapist of a 15-year-old girl? Well, George Floyd held a pregnant lady at gunpoint, had multiple allegations and multiple convictions of aggravated assault against women. That guy? Well, free Palestine. You mean the people that literally kill gays and beat the shit out of women have honor killings for women if they look at you wrong? The most archaic societies in the world when it comes to women's rights, and you're sitting here trying to tell me that's why you support them? It makes zero sense. And again, like, you leftist men, you guys gotta crack down on your liberal women because they're the ones running your party into the ground. Because they're too, and I'm going to say it, they're too emotional. They are. They think with nothing but how they feel about a situation. So they refuse to look at the details. They refuse to wait for the details and then refuse to actually think through those details in context. You see it all the time. How many times have AOC or Ilhan Omar has said the most outrageous things that are just completely blatantly wrong? And when people fact check her, it's just like no one calls her out on it, not her own party. They're in a vacuum. The left is in a complete vacuum. The right isn't. You see the right fighting with each other all the time. That's the beauty of the right. In my opinion, they will call out anyone. They 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 will eat each other alive. But you leftists, you're like your own little vacuum, and you're super vindictive. You see something happen, and it's like you immediately react. You're almost too reactive. Charlie Kirk dying, perfect example, right? It was like, dude, the heinous things I saw and the ignorance of people. I mean, even Stephen King got lashed, and then he had to retract what he was saying and say, "Oh, I was wrong. He wasn't that bad." Right? That's 95% of what you're seeing online. To you liberals out there, I hope this gets to you. You are seeing clips that are taken out of context, and you're constantly it's being weaponized against you. And it's causing you to feel so emotionally distraught and emotionally incompetent that you refuse to look at context, which is why you sit there and you think you're winning, and then all of a sudden Trump or some Republican wins, and you're like, how? How? You're like, how did he win? And I'm not talking about election. I'm talking about through policy. The government shutdown. All I saw was, this is a power move by the Democrats. We're crushing this. And the way your narrative was spinning was, this is the Republicans' fault for the government shutdown, which was bullshit. And anyone who knows anything about civics or how government works would know that, right? Is that the minority party for the Senate is almost always the one that initiates a shutdown. So it's one of those things where it's like, you sat here and you did that. And then it backfired. Then all of a sudden you were complaining about the leadership of the Democratic Party because you're the ones who openly were the day before, because the Democrats caved, because they realized we can't beat them. You are losing. If the right loses another election soon, it's not going to be because of you. It's because they don't think they're right enough. You see it all over Twitter. The thing you say about Trump is he's not right-wing enough. And you're the ones pushing that right contingent farther to the right. I'm being dead serious. That's exactly what's happening. You are doing that because you keep on being wrong. Look at Stephen A. Smith. He's a well-known liberal Democrat. Look at Bill Maher, well-known liberal Democrat, and he criticizes the left all the time lately. Because of what? Because you are wrong. In almost 95% of the situations or beliefs that you have, you are wrong in every single aspect most of the time when you guys step on them in the ring on a situation or an event. You are always on the wrong side. You guys got to change it. You have to. You guys got to either come a little bit farther in the middle and realize, like, oh shit, like maybe we are, or come to Jesus moment, right? Like, maybe we do need a strong border. Because again, like, you can change the border laws. You've had the majority for a while. You did. There was no change to it because they know that. They're weaponizing it against you. They can't change the border code because they know if they did, it would be political suicide for them. And they want to stay in power. So they sit there and they rant about border and immigration law being evil and all these hyper-leftist socialist hacks on Twitter try to tell you that it's evil, evil, evil. And you sit there and eat it up, but you don't realize, like, okay, then why don't it change it? It says in U.S. Border Code, any illegal migrant is subject to deportation or detainment, deportation anytime. Black and white, clear as crystal. Why don't they change that? Well, because if you do that, then you don't have enforcement at the border. And if you don't have enforcement at the border, then you don't have a border at all, which then you don't have a sovereign country. That's the reality of it. And they know that. And they know that if they did that or tried to do it, it would be political suicide. Because contrary to your belief, you are not the majority anymore. The right wing is outproducing you. They are. They have more kids. Those kids grow up to be more right wing. You're seeing it right now. The 70s and 80s parents have had Gen Z. They raised their kids. That was the Reagan years. These are the Reagan parents. Their kids are Gen Z. Their men are very, very, very conservative. You're losing that battle because of you. Because you're choosing the wrong side and you are desperate to be on the, quote, right side of history. But when you seek being on the right side of history, almost every time, you're on the wrong side of history. That's what you don't understand. every time. When you sit there and try to fabricate your own reality of being on the right side of history, and you have to keep telling yourself that, that means you know you're not on the right side of history. And that's what you hear all the time from liberal pundits. You see it on Twitter. You see it all over their MSNBC or MS Now. You see it all over CNN, especially when they were really liberal during the Biden administration, right? No, this is the right side. You hear that quote all the time. And you know, if you're telling yourself that, if you're telling your constituents that, you're not on the right side of history. A king doesn't have to announce himself as the king all the time. If he's a king, he's a king, and people know it, right? So it's one of those things where, like, if you want to fix the trajectory, not just the Democrat Party, but the left in general, you guys got to loosen up the reins on the authoritarianism when it comes to your ideologies. You know, contrary to popular belief, pretty much all of them, human society does not like it when you have man and women sports. Period. Dot. That's a fact. You're never going to win that. Okay? Like, that's a losing battle. People don't like it. Sports are mainly based on physical prowess. All right? Done. Contrary to popular belief, it does squirm people the wrong way to allow kids to decide if they want to be a different gender before becoming an adult. Because that's insane. It's absolutely insane. There's multiple studies now that have come out in the last 2 years by, like, the Mayo Clinic, Oxford University in England, that have done these multi-decade studies that just coincidentally concluded recently. And everything points to that it's a fad, essentially. Like, it's not like the most kids that say, like, oh, I want to be a girl, like the son who dresses up in high heels in the mom's dress one time, you know, or the tomboy-esque daughter, they're not trans, and they grow out of it. But because of the attention that it has grabbed, that's why all these outcasts, and I would call them outcasts, kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like the awkward kids, I guess. They gravitate towards that because it gives them that attention. It gives them that, like, oh, this catering to me because now I'm the center of attention. Right now, transgenderism is plummeting. Kids who identify themselves as transgender is plummeting drastically because of the fact that they realize, oh, it's really not that big of a deal anymore, and it was a fad. Because that's what it actually was. All right? And not to mention it's child abuse. That's a period dot. You can't be giving your kids hormones and stuff that fuck with their biology. All right? It's going to, again, it's already starting to. It's going to rear its ugly red head down the road. Especially the sons that are getting estrogen. I promise you that's going to bite you in the ass. So, again, that's not going to help you. Kids at pride parades. Look, pride parades used to be cool. Now they're like essentially soft porn. Either wrap it up and figure it out, or don't take your kids there. They also don't like kids drag queens. Sorry, but look, drag queens are inherently sexual. That's the whole gimmick. That's literally the gimmick of drag queens. Is I'm a man dressed as a woman. I made myself look pretty, and now I'm joking and talking to you about how pretty I am, and I'm tempting you. That's literally what drag queens are. Parents do not like it when their kids are being read to by drag queens. Done deal. You're never going to win. These things you're never going to win. Immigration, you're never going to win. People may not like ICE, for example, like going too far, if they go too far, but you're never going to beat like the enforcement at the border. That is a thing. To where you literally you were so bad on border policy the last 4 years that the southern counties in Texas who haven't voted Republican since 1896 swept through Republican on the Rio Grande. It was insane. That was unheard of. That's how bad it got. Those are other Hispanic communities down there, and they voted Republicans. They're tired of it. They left. These people who came here legally, they left their countries to leave people like that, who ignore rules, who ignore borders, who ignore that, and then are entitled to think that they just belong there and that you have to cater to them. They left that on purpose, and then we imported all that shit in. The left has to change its identity. You've lost the blue-collar workers. You have. There's a reason why Trump swept the big blue wall in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. big blue, uh, big blue collar areas. You've lost. I mean, you're losing the Latinos. You are. You're down what? I think Trump had 45%. He's only climbing with Latinos because the young generation of Latinos and Latinas are very conservative, very religious too. You're stagnant with the black community, but they're still a minority, and they're more of a minority than the Hispanic community. So, like, what are you doing? And then you're losing the white male vote. You're losing the male vote in general. 70% of Gen Z, 70% of Gen Z identifies as conservative, if not outright right wing. You need that. And trying to act like you're now this like gun, like I see these campaigns, like that fat chick, that campaigner for the Democratic Party, Olivia, I think, like morbidly obese. And she was like, I'm going to frat houses and doing it, and that failed miserably. Dude, you're not going to identify because everyone, the secret's out. We see it. Like, the problem is, again, to the left, you are losing the battle when it comes to influence, to the point to where people are not voting Republican because they don't think they're right-wing enough. That's literally where we're at. And it's because of you. You got too soft, too weak, too open to everything, where now you became so identity centered, I guess, when it came to race, gender, everything. Like, you became gray. You became nothing. You have no identity anymore. You just go with whatever you can salvage your party with. You're never going, like, Mamdani won New York. A lot of that's because the Muslim population there has been growing. He's going to bite you in the ass. He's going to crush you because he's going to implement all those socialist, communist things. And they are, whether you like it or not, whether you want to agree with it or not, and they will fail because other cities before them have done this, and they have failed. And it's going to drive Wall Street out, which, if you don't know anything about New York's economy, New York City's economy is pretty much all Wall Street now. They've lost a lot of their film industry. They have a little bit of the theater industry, but not really. And then that's it. If Wall Street leaves, because there's 2 other stock exchanges now. There's Texas and Florida. Guess what? Texas and Florida have low property taxes, low taxes in general. It's cheaper to live. Your money that you could move that Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange, you can move that down to Dallas, or you can move it to Tampa. Those guys are going to clean up because their dollars are going to go so much farther. You do it that way you will, but I'm telling you, Mamdani is going to kill you guys. Actually, he's gonna ruin your party even further. So you better hope those midterms outpace his failures, because he's going to hurt you real bad. All right. So today I went over some of the big kickers of why the left is in the state they are, why they lost the 2024 election, amongst other things, right? The vindictive is where I want you to take away from this, because, like, the celebratory of Charlie Kirk shooting, or the crazy delusion or derangement when Trump was shot, and then again, and then when he won. Like, the derangement, like, and to my right-wing bubbas, if you sit there and you are arguing with the leftists, all you gotta do is let them talk. Because they're gonna make themselves look. Just ask them questions. Always drive into the questions, go on the offense, and then let them try to answer. Just let them answer, because they're gonna answer wrong. Anyway, so I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Try to have those discussions. I want you to have those discussions. I don't want you to sit here and just, when you hear, if you're a young college guy, I don't want you in your class just sit there and fake it just to get an A. I want you to challenge the status quo. We as, more the right-wing guys got to go on the offense here. All right, we do. And if you're a leftist, dude, I want you to sit here and actually listen out to your right wing guys, because we're not like evil people. We don't give a fuck about that. We just want what's best for our future families. We don't care about being some sort of bleeding heart to people halfway across the world. We don't care about people who don't want to become American. We just don't. We care about our families. We care about what we need to do to make it better for the next generation. All right? And giving a bunch of money to other entities and constantly demonizing, for example, like demonizing white people is not the way to go. I don't want my white daughters, when they grow up in 10 years, to feel like they can't speak out loud because they're white. You're like, to the left, you're losing men, and you better figure it out, because once you lose men, as you saw in 2024, you lose every election. We're far more powerful and far more loud, because guess what? The reality of it is we're sitting there talking to our wives. They're going to vote usually the way we do. Our kids are, in Big Fat Greek Wedding, I don't remember, but it's like the male is the head of the household and the woman is the neck. That's real. When you have a household, you'll know. And when those two are raising your kids and they're outproducing you by a metric mile, it's only going to get worse for you guys from here. So it's either you try to understand where we're coming from and we try to compromise, or eventually you're going to get outproduced and you're eventually gonna fail. And again, if you do win, you'll win some elections here and there. I do think you'll win the midterms, because again, if you reference my first podcast, you have right-wing influencers that are sitting there telling right-wingers not to vote because Trump isn't right-wing enough and we have to prove a point or some shit like that. Like that's where it's coming from. It's because they're not voting. But if they get mobilized again, you get like a Gavin Newsom, or you get an AOC in the presidency, and then they do the exact same thing Biden and flop it on its head. And like, if Gavin Newsom gets in the presidency, which he has a good chance of doing, he's going to crush this country. He's going to gut it, and just like he did California. My family's from Southern California originally. We got ties there. We keep track of it. Like, he is not a good governor. He has fucked it up 6 ways to Sunday. Again, he inherited a $12 billion surplus, and since he's been in office, it's been a $62 to $70 billion deficit. So you do with that what you will. But either way, that's it. That's all I got. So please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Again, we're here to discuss. And hopefully if I get enough subscribers or likes or get a little bit more just exposure, hopefully I can find the time to make a little bit more content and actually do those Whiskey Fridays where they're live, and or Saturdays, whatever works for you guys. And yeah, that's all I want. So anyway, peace out, guys. Have a good one.